Okay, so my name is Tyler Manier, and today I'm going to be presenting my short story entitled The Hidden Killer. So I thought I'd start off by reading some of the intro. The screams shot through the neighborhood, echoing off of houses and sending chills through the night. Jack Barnes heard it through the blast of music from his headphones. He was a typical young man, early 20s, still living with his parents in their quiet little suburb. Tonight he was wearing jeans and a t-shirt of his favorite band. His small bedroom was messy and covered with clothes. He peered out the window. The screams seemed to have come from the house across the street. The lights were on, but he decided to go knock on the door just to check and make sure that the old lady that lived there was okay. As he walked down the steps in the well-lit foyer of his two-story home, he noticed his brother Matt was nowhere to be found. So the basic plot to this story is Jack here hears this scream, and when he goes over to investigate, he finds this old lady has been murdered, and at first he's just like freaking out. He doesn't know what to do. So when he goes to leave to get help or whatever, that's right when the police show up, and so he gets taken to jail and like put on death row and everything for a crime he didn't commit. And like us as the readers, we know that he didn't do it when it says that he finds the body. But so the rest of the story is really just about finding like who really did it and who that real killer is. So obviously the story is like a murder mystery type story, and the inspiration from that really came from TV actually. I'm a big fan of like CSI and NCIS and shows like that. But for me it was really not about like everything leading up to the crime. For me, I really enjoyed just like the ending of those shows. I was really interested in like who the killer was and like why they did it and how they did it and stuff like that. Like that was what was the most interesting to me, and that's kind of present in my story because there's a twist at the end, and like the whole thing is really about you know, finding out who the killer is. So like that's you know, the ending, that's the climax. Some techniques that I used. The big one was I just tried to put as much detail into it as possible. I wanted the reader to really feel like they were there, and you know, be able to kind of like paint a mental image of what they thought the scene would look like. So here's an example of that. The old lady that they found, her name is Mrs. Bench. So this is a little bit into the story. The Barnes had known Mrs. Bench for years, since they moved in when Matthew was just a baby. She was a kind old lady with short gray hair who had taught for nearly 40 years before finally retiring. She was known for her charm bracelet that was the home to several tiny glass animals, a gift from her mother passed down from generations. The bracelet enforced her nice and friendly personality. Although she never had any kids, she always joked that since all of the kids in the neighborhood were like her children, she would one day pass the bracelet on to one of them. So the cool thing with adding detail like that, number one, it really helps paint a picture of what the scene might look like. Number two, it really helps describe what the character's like, because it says, you know, even though she never had any kids, she joked that since all the kids in the neighborhood were like her children, she would one day pass the bracelet on to them, and that kind of shows like her nice, caring personality. And then another technique that I used was connecting my own experiences into the story. An example of that is later on they find a shoe with wings, like a tiny little shoe with wings, that looked like it would be on the bracelet, but it actually wasn't on the bracelet. It helps to find out who the real killer is later on in the story. But the significance of that is I'm a track runner. I run track, and the shoe with wings is kind of like the symbol for that. Any runner would know that. So that's kind of like my little thing in that. For me, the story was a lot easier to write than like research papers and stuff like that, because a lot of times with research papers you have to, like, you're given a topic, or you can pick, but you have to pick from a list of certain topics. And for me, a lot of times the topic wasn't necessarily something that I really enjoyed or really cared about, to be honest. And So when I was researching and stuff like that, it was a lot, it wasn't like 100% a lot of times. Whereas with this, it was all up to me. Like I came up with the story, you know, all the details I added and stuff like that, it was all original. And you know, that helped kind of like with the flow of writing it. It was a lot easier to write because it just kind of came to me. I didn't have to like research it and look stuff up to know what to write next. For when I go through this the second time, one of the main things that I'm going to add is details, not just to the setting, but to the characters as well. I want the reader to be able to like picture the setting and like stuff like the bracelet and like objects in the story, but I also want them to picture the characters and see what the characters would really look like. And I'm going to do that through like descriptions of the characters and then possibly more dialogue to kind of get an idea of how the characters talk and like, you know, that could help with, you know, their personality and stuff like that. Does anybody have any questions?